before we start, sit with this for a second. A movie made for $3 million, shot in 32 days on a college campus in Oregon, ended up becoming one of the most quoted comedies ever put on film. Everybody remembers the toga party. Everybody remembers a horse in the dean's office. What almost nobody remembers is what happened to the people who made it. Some of them became legends. Some of them vanished on purpose. Some of them didn't survive the decade that followed. This is the real story of the cast of National Lampoon's Animal House, before the cameras rolled, and everything that came after. John Belushi was born on January 24th, 1949, in Chicago, the son of Albanian immigrants who ran a restaurant. By the time Universal cast him as Bluto Blutarsky, he was already a breakout star of Saturday Night Live, known for an intensity that seemed to burn twice as hot as everyone around him. He was 28 when Animal House started shooting, and although he only had a handful of speaking lines, he dominated nearly every scene he was in without saying a word. The eyebrow raise, the smash beer can against his forehead, the food fight declaration that needed zero dialogue to be understood. What almost nobody watching in 1978 could have guessed was how quickly his life would spiral after the film made him a household name. Colleagues who worked with him in this era have described a man who was constantly approached by people offering him drugs on the street, at parties, on set. Friends tried to intervene more than once. By early 1982, Belushi was living out of Bungalow 3 at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles while working on a screenplay. His marriage to Judith Jacqueline was strained by distance. In the final days of his life, according to accounts later given in court and in journalistic investigations, a woman named Kathy Smith was supplying him with drugs, including injections of heroin-cocaine mixture known as a speedball. On the night of March 4th, 1982, both Robert De Niro and Robin Williams stopped by the bungalow and later said they sensed something was seriously wrong before they left. The next day, March 5th, 1982, Belushi's trainer discovered his body. He was 33 years old. Kathy Smith would later be convicted in connection with his death. Belushi's passing became one of the defining Hollywood tragedies of the era, a reminder of how fast fame, money, and addiction could collide. He's buried on Martha's Vineyard, and to this day his grave remains one of the most visited in American comedy history. If Belushi was the loudest presence in the film, Stephen Furst was at heart. He played Kent Flounder Dorfman, the anxious pledge who accidentally shoots a horse and gets talked into borrowing his brother's car for the film's climactic road trip. Furst was born on May 8, 1954, in Norfolk, Virginia, and was only 22 when the movie was shot, the youngest member of the Delta House cast. Furst's own life story before the film is genuinely remarkable. When he was a teenager, both of his parents died within a short span of each other, and he was subsequently diagnosed with diabetes himself. Rather than retreat, he moved to Los Angeles determined to become an actor, taking work delivering pizzas to pay rent while chasing auditions. As the story goes, and Furst told versions of it himself in interviews over the years, he began tucking his own headshot inside the pizza boxes he delivered, hoping one might land on the right desk. Eventually one did, catching the attention of National Lampoon producer Matty Simmons, who brought him in to read for the role that would define his early career. After Animal House, Furst had a long and steady career that many fans never fully connected to Flounder. He was a series regular on St. Elsewhere for 6 seasons, played a memorable supporting role in Babylon 5, and moved increasingly into directing and producing television as the years went on. He remained candid about living with diabetes for his entire adult life, even co-writing a book about the experience. Stephen Furst died on June 16, 2017, at the age of 63, from complications related to the disease that had shaped so much of his life. His family asked fans not to mourn quietly, but to honor him the way he would have wanted, by making someone laugh. Cesare De Nova played Mayor Carmine DePasto, the smooth-talking, corrupt town official who tries to shake down the Delta House for a homecoming parade payoff. De Nova was born on March 1, 1926, in Bergamo, Italy, and by the time Animal House was shot, he was already a veteran of decades in film, fluent in 5 languages, and a genuine Renaissance figure, a former competitive fencer, rugby player, and pilot. Long before Animal House, De Nova had been cast in a substantial role in Cleopatra opposite Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. According to accounts from that production, Once Taylor and Burton's off-screen romance became public and reshaped the film's focus, several supporting roles, including his, were trimmed down considerably in the editing process. It was a kind of near miss that could have made him a leading man in a different Hollywood, and instead, he spent the following decades as one of the industry's most reliable, almost stars, respected, employed constantly, but never quite elevated to the top tier. De Nova kept working steadily for the rest of his life, including a supporting role in Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets and dozens of television guest appearances. He never really slowed down. On March 19th, 1992, at the age of 66, he had just finished shooting an episode of In the Heat of the Night and traveled to a meeting of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles, where he was participating in a committee that selects the nominees for the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar, an ambition that connected back to his roots in Italian cinema. He suffered a fatal heart attack during that meeting. John Vernon played Dean Vernon Wormer, the humorless administrator determined to shut down the Delta House, delivering what's become one of the most quoted lines in comedy history about the perils of being fat, drunk, and stupid. Vernon was born Adolphus Vernon Agopswicz on February 24, 1932, in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, and trained at London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Long before Animal House, his resonant baritone had already made him a familiar screen villain. He appeared in Dirty Harry, Point Blank Opposite Lee Marvin, and Alfred Hitchcock's Topaz, among many others. By most accounts, Vernon initially wasn't eager to take a role in what he saw as a lightweight college comedy, feeling it was a step down from the serious dramatic work he'd built his reputation on. His daughter, Kate Vernon, later said that Animal House ended up reviving and extending his career in ways he hadn't expected, introducing him to a new generation who knew him only as the Dean rather than as a big-screen heavy. Vernon continued working steadily for decades afterward, including voice roles in animated series that introduced him to yet another generation of fans, and he remained a fixture at Animal House anniversary events well into his 70s. In January 2005, he underwent heart surgery. The procedure itself reportedly went well, but his recovery did not, and just over 2 weeks later, on February 1st, 2005, his daughter found him at his home. He was 72. Not everyone remembers Doug Kenney's face, because his most important role in Animal House happened behind the camera, not in front of it. Although he did appear briefly on-screen as Stork, the Delta pledge who wanders off with the marching band during the parade. Douglas Kenney was born on December 10, 1946, and grew up in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, before attending Harvard, where he became president of the Harvard Lampoon, along with fellow Harvard alum and comedy writer Henry Beard. He co-founded National Lampoon magazine in 1970, before going on to co-write the Animal House screenplay with Harold Ramis and Chris Miller. By the summer of 1980, Kenney had also co-written and produced Caddyshack. The reviews for that film were rough at the time of its release, and by numerous accounts from friends and collaborators, Kenney took the criticism extremely personally at a moment when his use of cocaine had already begun to escalate. Concerned friends, including Chevy Chase, encouraged him to get away and try to get healthy, and the two of them traveled to Hawaii together. Chase eventually had to return to the mainland for work commitments, leaving Kenney alone on the island. On August 27, 1980, Kenney went hiking near the Hanapepe Lookout on the island of Kauai, an area known for its dangerous, unguarded cliffside terrain. His body was discovered several days later at the base of the cliff. He was 33 years old, the same age Belushi had been when he died, less than 2 years earlier. Harold Ramis, reflecting on the loss for years afterward, offered a line that's been repeated in nearly every retrospective of that era of comedy since. That Kenney had probably fallen while looking for a place to jump, a devastating way of capturing how genuinely uncertain the circumstances were, and how much pain Kenney had clearly been carrying. Without Doug Kenney, there is no Animal House, no Caddyshack, and arguably no modern American college comedy as we know it, and he never lived to see how much his work would come to mean to audiences. Verna Bloom played Marion Wormer, the Dean's unhappy, quietly rebellious wife who ends up spending the toga party with Otter in the film's most memorable romantic subplot involving a supermarket cucumber. Bloom was born on August 7, 1938, in Lynn, Massachusetts, and studied at Boston University before helping build a theater company in Denver. She made her Broadway debut in 1967 in Marat/Sade, one of the most demanding and unconventional plays of the era, establishing her as a serious dramatic actress long before comedy ever entered the picture. What most audiences never realize is how significant Bloom's dramatic work was outside of Animal House. She appeared in Haskell Wexler's Medium Cool, a landmark film shot partly using real documentary footage of the 1968 Democratic National Convention riots in Chicago. Bloom was reportedly mistaken for an actual protester during filming and briefly detained. She also played the Virgin Mary in Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ, a role she considered one of the proudest of her career, and she appeared in Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter, as well as Scorsese's After Hours. Bloom married writer Jay Cox and eventually settled in Bar Harbor, Maine. In her later years, she experienced a decline connected to dementia. She died on January 9, 2019, at the age of 80. Those close to her have said that despite being best remembered by mainstream audiences as the dean's wife, she considered her serious dramatic work, especially playing Mary in a Scorsese film most casual fans never saw, to be what she was proudest of. Sarah Holcomb played Clarette de Postal, the mayor's daughter who becomes entangled with Pinto during the toga party, in a storyline that was controversial even at the time of the film's release. Holcomb was born on September 11, 1958, in Connecticut, and was 19 years old when filming began in October 1977, despite playing a character described in the film as 13. It was her first movie role, and it launched her into an intense spotlight almost overnight. Chris Miller, one of the film's co-writers, later described Holcomb as younger than the rest of the cast and crew, and said she found herself pulled into what he called a fast, drug-heavy environment during that period of her life and career. She went on to appear in a handful of additional films over following 2 years, including Caddyshack, but by 1980 or 1981, her acting career had effectively ended. Multiple sources over the decades, including biographical entries about her life, have indicated she struggled with substance use and with serious mental health difficulties during this period, and that she was hospitalized for a time before stepping away from the industry entirely. What's remarkable about Holcomb's story is not just what happened, but what happened next. Nothing publicly for more than 4 decades. She has not given interviews, has not appeared at Animal House reunions or anniversary events, and has deliberately kept her life private ever since, reportedly living quietly in New England. Even a 2004 independent film, Stateside, whose central character was reportedly inspired in part by her story, wasn't something she participated in or commented on. Whatever she has been through, she made a decision to protect her privacy completely, and by all accounts she has succeeded. As of 2026, she will be 67 years old, and remains deliberately the cast member the public knows the least about. The film's antagonists, the preppy, rule-following Omega fraternity, were played by a trio of actors who, unlike several of their Delta counterparts, largely avoided the tabloid-worthy tragedies of the era and instead built long, steady careers out of spotlight's glare. Mark Metcalf played Niedermeyer, the ROTC-obsessed Omega House leader, and easily the most quotable villain in the film. Metcalf continued acting for decades afterward, showing up memorably in music videos for Twisted Sister in the 1980s, playing a variation on the same tyrannical authority figure, and later took recurring roles on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Seinfeld. He also became a restaurant owner in Wisconsin and has remained an engaged, visible presence at Animal House anniversary events and reunions over the years, often writing candidly about his former castmates. James Doughton played Greg Marmalard, the smug, image-obsessed Omega president. He continued acting through the 1980s in a handful of other films before shifting behind the camera to work as a casting director and producer, choosing a much quieter, more private life than many of his former castmates. Bruce McGill played D-Day, the motorcycle-riding Omega, who technically isn't a full member of the fraternity, but is very much part of its culture of intimidation. Of the trio, McGill built by far the longest and most consistently visible on-camera career, appearing in Michael Mann's The Insider, the MacGyver television series, and dozens of other film and television projects across 5 decades, frequently cast as authority figures. A funny echo of his Animal House role, just on the other side of the law. Several of the film's core Delta House cast went on to have genuinely successful, decades-long careers, in some cases becoming far bigger stars than Animal House itself. Tim Matheson played Eric Otter Stratton, the smooth-talking, charismatic Delta ringleader. Matheson had actually been acting since childhood, going back to the Leave It to Beaver era of television. And after Animal House, he continued to build a long career, including an Emmy-nominated recurring role on The West Wing. In 1989, he purchased National Lampoon magazine itself and ran it for a period of years. He has remained a working actor well into his 70s. Peter Riegert played Donald Boone Schoenstein. He went on to appear in two well-regarded, smaller films that became genuine favorites among critics, Local Hero in 1983 and Crossing to Lancey in 1988, and has continued working steadily in film and television in the decade since, widely respected within the industry, even though he never chased the same level of mainstream fame as some of his castmates. Karen Allen played Katie, Boone's girlfriend and one of the more grounded, sympathetic characters in the film. Almost immediately after Animal House, she landed the role of Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark, becoming one of the defining action heroines of her generation, a role she later reprised in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. She has continued acting while also building a second career as a tech